Just a few rounds left in the GT3 World Championship here. Precious few points on offer for the final couple of rounds, but points to be made by someone and some time. Well, today, how far could today's race go to determining a champion? We are about to find out. Hello and welcome, everybody, back to GT3 Fridays here on RCI TV. Jesse Lee joined by Ryan Mawson and Stewie in the box as per usual. And what you see on your screen is a very dimly lit Paul Ricard in France. Ryan Mawson, it's very dark out here. This is the first time we've been here since the rule changes to the way the sim works. Could be more penalties for track limits today, and also the BOP's different. But some of the classic cars that have always been fast here continue to.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, Paul Ricard, even before you implemented the changes, was a bit of a menace for the track limits. It is so easy to go off here because unlike a lot of circuits where you have elevation changes, you have your braking markers, you can time it to marshal posts, hills, trees, everything. Paul Ricard is nothing. A lot of people I know sort of classify it as a glorified car park for the airport. It's flat. There's nothing. There's no braking markers, and you take away all the light. It's gonna make it any easier for the drivers. But yeah, in practice so far, some of the classics coming out to show once again. Herbert Frechelle in that 86 springs to mind. The Honda, even though it might not be the best overall lap time, it's kind of like Bathurst is this track where the great handling cars can still put on some monumental times because of the first and third sectors. But down the straight, how do you defend from something that has just got so much more straight line speed than you?
Well, the simple answer to that question is you don't. You can't do it safely. The stewards won't appreciate you blocking wildly either and unsafely. So, yes, you don't really have too much recourse to that sort of thing. It's going to be interesting to see just how good the cars that are really good down the straight can be in the turns. Will it balance out? Historically here, that has been the case. Herbert Frechelle, who spent a lot of this practice session at #1, down in P5 for the moment, has Jonas Savalainen in the 100 AMG out front here. We've heard a lot since the 1.8 update about what they've done to the likes of the Ferrari and how maybe it's less balanced than it used to be. Doesn't seem to be hurting them here. Of course, the track limit's also an issue that will likely come into play. They're a little bit stricter than they might have been earlier in the season. Well, 2 rounds left, and the elephant in the room, Ryan, I think we need to get this out of the way. The George Boothby car and the Jardier car not here today. 2 completely different reasons, apparently. Jardier not feeling well, and Boothby welcoming in a new life into the family, apparently.
Yes, which we wish him all the best for that. But obviously, the two heavy hitters, those Porsches, which were looking just unstoppable at the early parts of the championship, signed out, which basically brings it where Tico van der Velde, he is going to get that monumental points lead that maybe he wanted coming into this championship. But today, that car, the 166, at least in free practice, not the fastest overall, only by just under 0.2 of a second. But like I said earlier, in the race, if you've got someone in front of you who has more straight line speed, get away quicker than you, and I'm looking at that 100 of Savalainen, that Mercedes is still, you cannot fault that big 6.2 litre V8. It's going to be a difficult day, I think, for the McLaren.
It could be, and I think if there was ever a day that you'd want your championship rivals to not be here, day would be that day. Nobody else really even in the same area code. It could be a day, even if Tico has issues, as long as they finish somewhere in the points, they could clinch the championship going into the final round. But, well, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And the 166 is going to have to perform here today. I guarantee that. If you weren't with us for G4s yesterday, we saw that nightmare scenario play out live in the final round. The championship leader in the AM category only needed 7 points to win that championship in a field of 5 cars. Couldn't get those points, ended up losing the championship. Never say never. You just don't know how it's going to play out here. But that is what's on the line for Tinko van der Velde. And now we fast forward to qualifying. After qualifying, of course, we will show you the championship breakdown with just 2 races left to go. But for now, 10 minutes of qualifying. Lights have been turned back on, 8 p.m. here in sim time in France. Now with the change in visibility a little bit, Ryan, does that mess with your braking areas and maybe your turn in points a little bit now that they've all changed? The lighting changes and also so does your eye level.
I think if anything, it makes it a little bit easier at Paul Ricard. You can kind of judge a lot of the corners from the rumble strips, and you do have the tiny yellow bollards that are scattered around this track. Those are not only markers for the drivers, though. They are what dictate the track limits. You'll see them. Those are the white and red striped bollards. Those are the track limits. If you run too wide coming out onto the main straight, the game will give you a nice little track limits penalty for that. Amass 3 of them, you get a drive-through, and trust me, having raced here enough, I can tell you that the drive-through creeps up on you a lot faster than you might expect. It's some of the scariest corners on the track as we watch from the onboard, this corner in particular. Fast right-handed, you can see the car already taking a bite out of Savalainen, but keeps it on the road. Cold tyres still, trying to get some heat into them, and then this just the long sweeping right-hander. The flow of the last section is brilliant. But those left side tyres are just screaming in agony. And I'm wondering how many of these drivers are going to put on setups, you know, the ultimate sharpness and twitchiness. And that corner is going to really bite some people, I think.
I think it absolutely is. You saw the little mini bollards there. The don't go beyond this point. That is still the case. You actually see them right there. As long as you don't go past those little white little bollards with the red stripe on them, you are good. You will not violate track limits, and even though you technically are violating track limits, they have dictated that that is okay to go to at least that point. I believe that was put there several years ago, almost at driver's request of, hey, just tell us, you know, where the out of bounds line is, and we'll not go over that line. And I believe they obliged quite nicely there, and it's also a very nice visual representation that is very strange as well. A visual aid of, hey, you can go out of bounds and it still be legal as long as you don't go too far out of bounds, right?
And that's probably some of the only visual representations you have, as you know, we can see out the windscreen. It's just so flat. There's the slight rise here, if you can call it a hill, going along the back straight, which in a lot of other forms of motorsport, they use the chicanes, which we're just seeing fly by to the left and the right. But in the GT cars, you're not. What is big Mercedes going to get to? 270, 277? And I've seen some of the people who put monumental speed setups on this. You can touch 280 and Savalainen. I'm wondering if that might be... Yeah, I think it is still valid. But that is how, you know, that is how close you can get to those bollards. If that car shuffles out any more underneath him, then that's an invalid lap, and then it's a long old lap as well. You know, you don't think about it by the time you've done an out lap and a full lap. You haven't really got much time to be wasting in this qualifying session.
Of course, this is the pro split. These are all the fastest of the fast that you can have in ACC, and with that, you are expected to be millimeter perfect, and I think Savalainen just was millimeter perfect there. Will set the benchmark time for the rest of the field. The 100 AMG goes 154.770. João Kovaca comes in, the next to qualify, 0.3 slower than Savalainen's time, but for the moment is in second. What does Dario Barzaghi have in his Audi? Third quickest, 1 second off the pace on a 55.777. If this was Final Fantasy, he'd get a special bonus, but it isn't. It's Assetto Corsa Competizione. So he will take that position, and Herbert Frischel, who we saw was really quick in practice, takes his 86 Honda to second, nearly a quarter of a second slower still than Savalainen, who I just noticed immediately came down pit lane. Why might that be?
Well, we did kind of touch on this at Kyalami a little bit and theorized. After the update, a lot of people are still trying to work out what is the strategy, what is the best course of action. It used to be in qualifying that actually you wanted to run maybe 2, 3, 4 laps on a set of tires. They needed time to break in. They needed time to, heat up and have a heat cycle in them. Then got the ultimate grip. But it does seem that on the new tires, with how quickly they heat up and how quickly you can destroy them, it actually might be beneficial to do that one flying lap, just sacrifice the tires, just completely burn them up to the wind, and then go and pit again. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Jardier did the same strat at Kyle Army, and Tinko stayed out. And there you go. That is a perfect representation of
Legal.
you can go. Yep, you can go out of bounds so long as you are on the track before those bollards. And I think Herbert Fischel was a few mil to spare, but yeah, that is what you can get away with. You've got to be careful doing that as well, though. The curb, although it doesn't show it on our broadcast cameras, the curbs here are very, very vicious and do want to unsettle the car a lot if you have a low slung setup. I know that I definitely won't be wanting to ride any of these. But what has the 86 got coming around at the final corner? The blast to the line, the V6 Honda, which is looking really strong in sector 2. What will it be? And he takes it pole with a 154.5.
That's more like it. Everybody take note up at the top of the straight exactly how fast and how close Herbert Fischel was to invalidating. Realized that he was overcooking it. He would have certainly liked to have just continued that momentum. It might have even broke his momentum a little bit, having to maybe get off the throttle just a little bit and turn a little extra to the right, but he kept it legal, and for a split moment was the quickest in qualifying. Taylor now the fastest of all in the number 17 Aston, a 54.432, the mark to beat for Shell, 1/10 back off of that mark. Valentin Barrier in the 72 Bentley in third place, a little bit slower than that. Soldatov in fourth, Savalainen all the way down in fifth. And where is Tinko van der Velde? Hasn't set a qualifying lap thus far. And also Martin Lawrence, who I am surprised who's in this race today. He just got a brand new wheel set up and is not finished in the setup process of that wheel. He told me in confidence yesterday that he wasn't comfortable with his new setup and needed more time. And we didn't expect to see him here, but here he is. Came in at the last possible moment, and the Connection Lost Racing driver is in this race. Ryan, can you talk about that a little bit, about how difficult that is? You change your entire setup and jump back into a championship. It all just feels different, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, as a sim racer, unlike anything that some of the real drivers would get, where you feel it through your body, you feel everything on these cars through the steering wheel. And if you get used to your setup and you're even sometimes changing rims, you don't even need to change the wheelbase. Changing the wheel, the diameter, the thickness, everything, you feel everything through your fingers, and you change that, it's completely, you're just putting a blindfold on again. You have to relearn everything a lot of the times. I know when I went, I upgraded to my Fanatec DD2, and that was just I think I spent 2.5 months before I even got somewhere near what my pace was again. I could feel so many things. It was amazing to feel, but I had no idea what any of these meant. And speaking of people who have not set their times yet, I think Tinko might finally be coming around to set his valid. If he's going to have this, he's going to have maybe one more lap as well. But it shows, though, how easy it is to invalidate it. It's been a couple that have been looking promising and then invalid.
Got some bad news for Van der Velde fans. I think he's invalidated this lap as well. I think he's trying to get the one moonshot lap, but I don't think he has now. Looking at the timing board, this might be his first valid lap. He was all the way to last, and he goes all the way to third with that lap, a 54.570, 3/10, or the better part of, off of Taylor, who has throwed down the gauntlet with a 54.285 in the interim, a quarter of a second behind Herbert Fischel. But for Tinko, that was a very nice lap that got them out of the basement. Rins Crozen at the bottom. We saw his brother Minnow Crozen take a little slide in his Bentley earlier. It's quite humorous. It looked like almost like a ballet move there, Crozen, but all good there as they'll get more laps. Zhao Kavaka coming to the line. They'll get an additional lap as well, all the way to second for the 33 Ferrari, a 54.4 4.95. And the times are coming down. It tells me that the drivers are getting more confident. The grip might be coming up as well. And did Frechelle get another lap? Yes, he did. Frechelle down in third place now will get one more shot here at pole position.
Yep, the 86 still managing to go around. I think they might have sneaked it. We haven't seen the checkered next to their name. It'll be interesting to see what they do coming across the line. What does Soldatov have? The Aston Martin, the 911, goes from sixth, it crosses the line, and they will stay sixth. But some of the great speed cars are looking up the top of the grid. You know, the Ferrari as well. That was always historically a good car here. And Savalainen retakes P2, not quite there for the 17 of Taylor. But what does Martin Grady have as well? We haven't really talked about Martin Grady today in the 18 Bentley. Crosses the line and will start in P11.
Pidge improving, not quite inside the top 10, but that'll be near enough. Grady always seems to race better than he qualifies around here. Tinko coming across the line and will improve a 54.412, but can do no better than third place. Taylor's in pit lane. Savalainen's in pit lane. Just saw Tinko come across the line, but what about Yaukavaka here in the 33 Ferrari? Could this be last lap heroics? He's going to be the last car to qualify or to set a lap rather. The 8 was on a lap. Barzaghi has invalidated, I assume. So we are riding on board with Zhao, who will be the last car across the line. This is trending really good. This could be pole position for Kavaka, and it is going to be a 54.222 and a surprise pole position for the Ferrari. Zhao Kavaka does it, and he does it, Ryan, without setting a single purple sector.
No, and if you look at the spread, it does kind of tie into what I thought might be. Tinko van der Velde, that car, the 166. The McLaren has such great downforce that in the third sector, that is purple by quite a margin. You know, it's almost a tenth of a second, even to pole. But the car just doesn't have the speed in the middle, doesn't have the speed in the first sector. The AMG with that great punchy acceleration, that is the Savalainen car takes the pole. And the 840, Adam Dubel, all the way down there in P9, he's got the purple middle sector, but the Ferrari, depending setup wise, you used to be able to hit, at least pre-patch, you used to be able to hit 280 kilometers an hour with nobody in front of you. You didn't even need the slipstream. It used to be vicious to drive against.
Well, 6 different cars in the top 6. You love to see that. That is brand parity, and that's exactly what SRO is looking for. That's what ACC looks to mimic, and I think they've done an excellent job there. Who would have ever guessed 6 different cars at a track like this up at the front? Well, we promised you the points, and this is the state of them. Tico van der Velde, winner of 3 races in a row after 2 races that were very exciting but dominated by the Jardier and George Boothby personnel. Well, Tinko has taken over the championship in a big way, 300 points level. Jardier, who didn't sign out for this event, but was communicated that they wouldn't be here today due to illness, is sitting tied for second place with teammate George Boothby in the 75. George Boothby did sign out for this event. I believe he's on daddy duty, I think is what we're going to call it here. But they have 257 points apiece, but will not gain more points. Nicholas Taylor, though, will gain points. A very nice qualifying for the driver of the AMR V8 Vantage there. 175 points, though. They will probably assume second place here. At the end of the day, it's going to be close one way or another. Christopher Streppen in the fifth place in the 747, 171 points. Martin Grady Tidge with 151. Konstantin Soldatov in the 911 with 148. 2 points behind them, Zhao Kavaka, who stole pole position just a moment ago. Herbert Frechelle in ninth place with 142. All of those drivers very close. Martin Lawrence in 10th place with 127. Valentin Barrier lines up in 11th place on this chart, 118 points. Minnow Crozen with 113. Mikhail Sundstrom at 106. Harry Conway, 87, will take no further part in this championship. However, Adam Dubell in the 840 with 85 points, Caracas in the 15 with 84. Jan Climbs with 78 points. Dario Barzaghi with 77. William Stevenson on 71 points. Rounding out the top 20, Darren Maholland with 58. This is the back half of the field. Rins Crozen on 54. Harley Chamberlain, 51. Alexander Bordai on 47. Max Payne, 46. Anna Frave with 42. Beeson on 35. Masoom is 31, level with Christoph Stekecki for the 27th position. Battistella with 20 points, and Pierre Daldigny with 15. And I'm fairly convinced the drivers on this page are no longer taking part. That one exception, of course, Jonas Savalainen in the 100, who has missed several races in this series, but will be racing today. So we showed you the top of the points championship. We showed you exactly the damage that Tinko has been able to do the last 3 weeks. Ryan, his domination has been incredibly impressive. I think we would all have to agree. But today doesn't seem like they're quite the fastest car. Luckily for them, they don't have to be. And I fear as well that the others, about fourth place on back, are just a little bit too far behind to mount any sort of charge. But you know what they say? I've said it twice already. I'll say it again. You never say never and you never give up because you don't know.
No, and Paul Ricard, you never know what's going to happen. We've seen some phenomenal racing here, and it's been very action-packed before. For Tinko, I think as well, his only saving grace, at least at the start, you've got that 17 Aston Martin in front. Historically, a bad car off the line, you might be able to get around and sort of slow them down for a little while. But I think putting more race fuel in that McLaren, I don't think it's going to aid anything through sector 1 and 2. And by the time you've got to sector 3, you're just a little bit too far out of striking range. I think it might be a bit of a damage limitation day. But as he says, been wrong before, and it's going to be really interesting to see the mix of speed and handling cars. And then some of the in-between ones. I know certain cars have certain quirks here, I will say. The Bentleys I'm going to be watching out for at the top of the hill. That corner is a little bit of a Bentley killer, depending on your setup. Have to keep some throttle on, kind of like a Porsche. If you fully unload one of the axles on that car, expect to go completely backwards. And speaking of Bentleys, who are joining us the last possible minute, as we can just about see, that is the 747. That's the Christopher Verstappen car that we talked about at the points. They only joined at the last possible second, got their car on the grid, but obviously no qualifying time for the 747.
Yeah, that's going to be a tall order, and I am amazed they made the grid, but our grid that was looking like 20 cars at the start of qualifying has ballooned into 22 at the last possible moment. And how crazy will that be? It's going to be interesting to see what Verstappen can do from the back of the grid. I don't know if they'll be last to first challenging today, but sort of improvement will be a very good one for them. And up at the front of the field, it is Kavaka, and we don't normally see Ferraris up front here. And normally it's a Honda, or it used to be sometimes a Bentley, etc., and so forth. But a Ferrari up front here, you were talking about some cars are going to maybe not have the punch off the line. Some of them are going to struggle down the straightaway. These first couple of laps are going to be very chaotic indeed. Luckily, we have an army of stewards. Of course, just like every other Friday race, live stewards here, and they'll be trying to keep up with the action just like we are.
First couple of laps as well, I think, is very much going to be the slipstream train. No one is going to want to. No one's going to want to break formation down this straight unless you absolutely have to. It might be interesting to see who is prepared to work with the fellow driver to try and break away from a pack, or who just wants to get out ahead and lead. If you can break that sort of 1 second slipstream, where it stops being a big effect, you can really then start to pull out on people, especially if your car already has the straight line speed advantage. I'm looking at that Ferrari, especially even on race fuel. I know a few times where I've been racing, Ferraris in my Bentley, fully in the slipstream, and you do not gain at all. No one in front of them. Going to be a hectic first few laps, I think, and for Tinko, I think it's really going to be a damage limitation day. But that drive, you cannot underestimate Tinko. You can't take your eyes off of him. In a race, that McLaren always does seem to do better.
How many times have we seen Tinko running third, maybe even fourth, and then all of a sudden we're talking about him winning a race? We talk about him maybe stealing his race one victory, and then race two, he had a really decent race with Boothby and Jardier, ended up coming out on top. And last week, just flat dominated the race. It's almost like he's getting better with every passing race. It's incredible to watch. We'll have to see what he does here today, starting from the no, well, not the front row of the grid. And earlier when we came on air, talked about points being very valuable and hard to come by. It's more than just a race for the championship as well. Keep in mind, we had 30 plus cars on that championship standing board that we showed you just a moment ago, and all of those drivers are fighting for something. There are 3 deadlocks, 3 ties in that championship standings, and trust me, if you're a committed driver, you know where you stand in those standings. You know who you're racing. That's what you're focused on here tonight. Well, it's going to be a dark start and a dark race here in France. We thank you all for being with us here. We hope that wherever you are, you're doing well, and we look forward to getting this race underway. 1 hour, 15 minutes, just gone 10 p.m. in sim time. Track temperature 18 degrees C and cloudy as we wait for the green flag and the lights to go from amber to green. And there they go. Kavaka and Taylor on the front row, Savalainen and Vandervelde, and look at the AMG pull into the inside lane, has to back off, and it's going to be the Aston up front, side by side, contact right there as they enter two.
Tinko Vandervelde just getting the slight tap there from Kavaka. It was one of those cold tire moments. Actually, the Ferrari backed out as well, let the Aston Martin go. Obviously didn't want to fight that too much. Back through the pack was still too wide. Too wide through this corner. That is Barzaghi, that is the Audi. If you can keep on the outside, this is another one of those corners that we've mentioned before. Keep on the outside, you have the inside line for both of these corners running onto the back straight. You can often get it. And now it's Harley Chamberlain versus Martin Lawrence down the straight line. But look at the Honda pull, swipes across the nose.
Well, it's gone from bad to worse, not quite the qualifying board I would have wanted in his 98 Lexus. He's also got to start position infringement as well. That has led to a drive-through penalty, but Konstantin Soldatov here trying to work on and be worked on by Adam Dubel in the 840 Ferrari. It's going to have to yield there, and Soldatov's going to hold the position, but it wasn't without an excellent challenge by Dubel.
And that's what I sort of thought would happen. It's the slipstream train down the straight, and you've got to pick your side. But going around the top of the hill, go around the outside, is a very, very risky maneuver. And look at all the cars. You know, as far as I can see, actually, it's one of the cars going a little bit wide. Still on these cold tires, got to get them up to temperatures, and you know, you're always thinking in the back of your head about these track limits. I would not be surprised to see at least a few drivers with one warning already.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Of course, the first time that many of these drivers would have been here since the 1.8 update, their cars probably handle a lot differently here than they would have. The grip level is different. How they drive down the straightaway is going to be different as well.
Wide into turn one. There goes Max Payne. That's another car that we sort of mentioned, one of the older gen cars that you might not see much anymore. Still is quite the car at Paul Ricard, just with the straight line speed. Balancing barrier, mounting an attack on Joe Kavaka, who does have the fastest lap so far, and we've got a Porsche off.
Rins is off. He's all by himself. Has this happened? Yeah, it's just, unfortunately, Porsche doing Porsche things, tries to save it, and luckily, the massive runoff zones that aid in slowing down the car without the need of a gravel trap, working an absolute treat. Oh, but it's gone wrong again! What's going on with Rins Krozen here as he's towed to pit lane?
something not quite right with that car. As she says, at least at Paul Rick, you've got plenty of runoff. And here we go again. See, Soldatov, he wanted the inside line. Barzaghi knows all he has to do is defend it, but he's gone for the cutback as Soldatov. If you can get the run and get your nose just underneath, he cannot come into the fast right. Oh, but the Audi's off. The Audi has twitched.
That's another thing we didn't talk about here, but you're going to see this. This is a flat racetrack. I know there's elevation change, but the corners are mostly flat. Some of them have maybe a few degrees of banking, but on a flat track, you have to set up the tires, the camber and all that a little bit differently to get maximum adhesion, and I don't think this is something you experience a ton at a lot of other tracks. Even if you don't notice it, a lot of tracks do have some subtle camber and grip, but here, it's absolutely not going to be the case. And if you turn in a little too hard, you start to lose it, then you turn back the other way to counter steer as if you were trying to fend off a drift. Then the tires at that exact moment decide to grip, and then all of a sudden you're backwards. We saw it happen to Rins, and that almost happened there to the Audi, but alas, a good save saves what potentially could be their entire race. Imagine an hour, 15 minutes, and having something happen in the first 5 takes you out of the last part of the race. That would be absolutely devastating, especially after all the preparation just to get here.
Absolutely, and but looking back at this little pack at the front of the grid, this is P3, 4, and 5. P2, Tinko just about visible there. We thought that might happen, you know, while these lot are fighting together. Tinko's pulled out a little bit of a lead, and so is Taylor. They are done and dusted. Big Bentley roaring up the straight. That is not a view I would want in my rearview mirror, though. You can see nobody wants to break the slipstream. Everyone follows the car in front exactly. If there is a, you know, half a tenth to be gained, then the race drivers will definitely go for it. And look how unsettled some of these cars look through the upper halves of the circuit. Sparks fly from the Mercedes.
Gonna watch a replay here, trying to get to the top of the hill, and oh, a little bit of a save there as Luce is fastened on the edge of out of control. I think that qualifies and ticks all the boxes. Rins Crozen has joined us in chat, being a little bit sarcastic about his last 2 racing efforts, and I am sad to say that the number 81 Uwu can't get more pink Porsche has pulled the garage door down. They will take no further part. That car just looked evil on that first couple of laps.
And as well, it might have been where the car changes so much dynamically between quali and race fuel just because of the placement of the fuel tank. You haven't practiced all of your eventualities. You haven't practiced the Porsche in the cold, in the warm, with no fuel, full fuel. You know, all of that you have to expect that it will give you surprises. So yes, that car will not take any further part. Looking back up the field, Savalainen now starting to put those moves onto Valentin Barrier. He's probably got the hardest job though, because you're attacking Barrier in the Bentley, but look at what is behind. This is Herbert Fischel again, the 86 Honda we mentioned has that great straight line speed. You go for a move on Barrier and it does not pay off, I would fully expect that Herbert Fischel will poke his Honda's nose there.
The broadcaster's amusing himself. He just told me that one of the cars at the back of the grid actually had the fastest lap there for a moment, and that was before Pico Vandervelde, who, by the way, is up to second here, went ahead and took that away. And what do we say about Tinko? He doesn't always qualify the best. He doesn't need to. He just has that race pace ability. Meanwhile, these two side by side, Savalainen, oh, getting way out there. That's a very dangerous move, but getting it together. Oh, it's going to get swapped by Herbert Fischel. Fischel just taking no for an answer, licking the stamp and sending it up the inside. That was a gutsy move.
And exactly what I mentioned. Savalainen, he went for the outside lane. I mean, nothing else that you can really do once you've caught up in the slipstream. You can see the Mercedes has such the great straight line speed even over the Bentley, but just no matter what you do, you can't get out of the way. And we're looking at a bit of a race replay of the start. Bit of bumping going on between some of the fellow Porsche drivers.
I wonder if he got aero damage there, and that's what caused the 81, because that looked strange, even from, you know, just to trying to get around the track standpoint. It didn't look odd. It did look very odd. And I wonder if maybe they got a little bit of damage and that upset the aero of the Porsche there.
Most likely, I mean, I can imagine a shunt of that magnitude would definitely break some of your front splitter. Well, won't make a car that is already a little bit unbalanced any easier. Once again, I think the term that I'm going to use for tonight as well is sparks flying in the night, or sparks from Herbert Frechel, taking very much a liberty with some of the curbs around here. You can do it if your setup allows it. Sometimes it's actually a little bit better to have a softer setup. And now here we come onto one of the longest straights going. Valentin Barry up ahead. The Paul Bentley, he has no one to help him with the slipstream. And you've got this Honda behind you with the slipstream. They're gaining, they're gaining. Here comes 270. I think Valentin Barrier, he will have to defend it. But Herbert Frechel, he's going to try the move what Savalainen tried a few laps ago. It didn't pay off for him. Can it pay off for the Honda? And in fact, he even cleared the Bentley before the corner.
And more importantly, stayed inside track limits, which is more than I could say for Adam Dubell, who went for a wild ride. We're going to ride on board Adam's car here. What happens? I just didn't turn in. He lost the nose, and he didn't get back in. And he did the smart thing there. We've seen that before, Mawson, where a car will miss it and then decides to, oh, I'm going to come back on the track. That does create accidents. But Adam, doing the smart thing there, didn't want to join the track, and then at a terrible angle, just kind of knew that he had blown the corner and continued on. Now, I love to see the awareness out of these drivers.
Yeah, and the Ferrari as well, another car that is quite needed to be very balanced. And if you upset the balance of that car, very easy to do at the top of the hill. We'll have another nibble at you. I think a lot of these cars with the pro drivers, you know, the fastest split that we have here in RCI, you need to set up your car for that ultimate pace, for that ultimate speed, and you just have to learn its traits. And a lot of times the drivers who can hold them on the absolute limit, you know, like we've seen Savalainen holding his car pretty much sideways through some of these corners, that is, you know, the kind of pace that you're expecting. And Valentin Barrier actually managed to get back ahead of the Honda again. So obviously Honda had a problem in sector 3 that we didn't quite catch, and he's got it all to do again. And I mean, for P1, P2, for Taylor and Van der Velde, you've got to be, and actually Kavaka, you know, you've got to be rubbing your hands together with glee, because while everyone else is battling, you are completely gone.
I was listening in on some of the teams, and I was eavesdropping, I promise you. Not information they gave me just casually, Ryan, but they were debating, a lot of the teams were debating, was it worth it to go 0 wing or 1 wing? And a lot of teams didn't go 0 or 1 wing, which is something they may have well done a month ago. They just didn't feel it was worth it because it just upset the car too much as Tidge completely blows the corner here. What happens here? We can see a similar thing. Oh, no! Yeah, that's a good call there, Tidge. I would have done the same thing.
Really what you want to be seeing out your windscreen as a driver, the broadside of a Bentley, but I did sort of think that those cars might be a bit of a handful up the top of the hill. It was a corner that even pre-patch would catch a lot of Bentley drivers out if you were not careful. But yeah, I've heard similar stories where certain setups that used to be the meta, it's what everyone did. You know, you take all your wing off here. It now doesn't really work, and it's that trade-off, and you've got to play it by the drivers around you. And a lot of times, I think in the pro splits, I would pick having corner speed and being able to fight in sector 1 and 3, rather than, you know, ultimate speed in the straight line, because we've already seen that if you can defend the inside well enough, very, very, very hard to go around the outside of the top of the hill.
Well, let's update you on some of the field, as that's really spicy action there, but well held by both drivers on both accounts. We talked about Tinko having the fastest lap. Nicholas Taylor has decided they want in on that action, and now are the fastest car on the track, has the single fastest lap, does the leader of the race. I tell you, Tinko still has something, but he would rather not have it. He does have a 5-second penalty for gains position after contact by cutting the corner. So 5-second penalty for Tinko van der Velde, an additional 5-second penalty for car 81 for accelerating in a braking zone, causing avoidable contact. Racing incident between the 899 and the 840. No further action between the 966 and the 49 deemed that the 966 took themselves out and the 49 was not at fault.
There you go. That's sort of caught up on some of the little doing reports immediately. A few drive-throughs as well pinging up, and those are already for track limits. So the drive-through for 777 and the 747, both the Bentleys respectively, that is not a stewarding decision. That is already a track limits. They've already hit their 3 and got it, and we are just about 10 minutes into the race, 15 minutes into the race. It doesn't really surprise me. It is kind of the nature of Paul Ricard. But look at it as well, when we were coming up that straight, Crozen battling the Ferrari, that's Mashoun, and ahead of them as well. It was basically just absolute in sync. One car on the inside, and then they have the cutback, one car on the outside. Just literally 2 for 2 through those corners.
Just an update on Verstappen, the late entry to the race. The 747 has come to pit lane and they have closed the garage door. That car is adding to our already long list of retirements in the first 15 minutes of this race. And there's been 3 or 4 retirements already, Ryan, as I think Paul Ricard and the the penalties, the self-inflicted penalties, mind you, are starting to get to some of the drivers here. One driver that did not quit is Darren Mulholland in the 777 Bentley. They are continuing as they served their penalty and left the pit lane. Herbert Frischel is going to give this another shot on Valentin Berrier. Has the inside. I feel like Berrier obliged there. It is going to drive right up to the back of the wing of that Honda. That's very scary, because if Frischel twitches right there, Berrier has nowhere to go and he's going to dump him.
Yeah, the Bentley getting incredibly large of the rear camera as well of the Honda. It is one of those as well. I think Berrier probably thought that he was going to go for the cutback maneuver. I have a feeling that's why it might have been pulled on the 86 Honda a few laps ago, which is why they fell back down. But as you can see, the monumental handling that the Bentley has, the Honda is sort of struggling through the corners. Here comes the 72 again, up on the inside. But once again, as long as Herbert can stay out ahead, there's nothing really you can touch in the straights. I think the Berrier might have gone for the cutback maneuver, but it was covered off this time.
One thing I've noticed about Berrier is trying to fight this position back, and he's going to get it back again. Same song, different verse. Here's the 911 of Konstantin Soldatov trying to go to the inside. If he can hold this is going to be brilliant. He's going to get a position here because we're going to be turning right. Can he hold it? He might just. But again, it's going to go left, but it's going to come back to right here. And it's going to be a tight one. Can the 911 keep the position? Yes, he is, as he slots in there. Herbert Frischel is going to be absolutely steaming. But I noticed something as the cars came into the light in the 3rd sector there. I think I have spotted what's going on with Frischel's 86 Honda, the Angry Bird Honda, as it were. It just looks unsettled midway through the corner, as if it doesn't have enough grip. Well, what it does have is just about the best top speed down the straightaway. That is what's creating a very nice battle here. Well, let's go back to the front for a moment. Taylor leads the race, and Van der Velde in 2nd place is a 5-second penalty, who's just about 5 seconds behind Taylor, but somehow has gained enough time to be in front of Kavaka by just over 5 seconds. So that penalty might not drop Tinko any particular places. Oh, huge contact here between Minnow Crozen and was that Massoum? I think it was.
I think the 82 just tried to go underneath in the corner. We've seen few drivers pull that, and it was Massoum. We'll get a race replay. Ferrari has a little bit of a twitch, goes wide. The Bentley is also sliding out, going wide.
Oh, big crash for Musa Massoum. Hard into the wall and an immediate tow to pit lane from the Iron Lynx driver.
I have a feeling that will have put some severe damage on that car. Obviously, decided to tow it to the pit lane. Definitely need a repair before. And actually, thinking of pit lanes, some people, like the 899 and actually the 100 of Savalainen, already coming in for their mandatory stop.
Well, with that out of the way, and do pay attention to Mikhail Sundstrom, who will be the first of the cars that have pitted. I know Savalainen actually was in very early as well, but pay attention to Mikhail Sundstrom. We'll see where he slots back out. I've always favored the undercut, but as I was previously sailing, Taylor leads the race. Vandervelde in second place by 5 seconds, and Jalkovaca 5 seconds adrift as well. So 5 second penalty won't really drop Vandervelde a place. At least it doesn't appear that way right now, but it will put him an additional 5 seconds behind Taylor. Obviously, Valentin Berrier and Soldatov rounding out the top five right now after Herbert Fischel was dispatched, I think is the correct word, dispatched by Berrier and Soldatov. As we're looking on board the Porsche here, that's what the MFD looks like on that particular car, as Limes is driving around in the 14th place position for Orlen Verva Racing.
I think I know what our broadcaster was hinting at there. 267 kilometers an hour, I think I saw on the MFD of that car that tops out at. And I mean, when you compare that to a lot of the fields doing 270, and some of the cars, when you're right at the peak with no fuel, you might be doing close to 280. Here's the onboard of the Mercedes, 274. Almost 10 kilometers an hour difference. So it is a sad day if you are a Porsche driver. You have everything in the corners if you can handle it. You don't have anything on the straights, though.
Yeah, rather unfortunately, this is the track where you need straight line speed the most. I know a lot of people say Spa, right? It's like, yeah, but all of those really long straightaways have a really fast corner before them, which really does help the Porsche out quite a bit. And don't get me started if it's a moist racetrack, then that's a complete game changer on many accounts. But here it is basically a death sentence.
Pretty much so. And looking back, we sort of get these little trains of battles as well at Paul Ricard. Here's 8th, 9th, and 10th. That is Martin Lawrence. Managed to get around as Tidge. Martin Grady in the 18 is now going to try the same move on Barzaghi. But the Audi can't hold its own in a straight line. If you look, we're now deep into the slipstream. No one is really gaining. If anything, the person who's going to be gaining the most is Martin Grady, because he's got the slipstream 2 cars. Martin Lawrence pulls to the inside in the mirror, but he's just trying to fluke him out. He knows that, and I think Barzaghi knows that he can hold off that Aston Martin on his own in a straight line.
That will not deter Martin Lawrence. Martin Lawrence, a race car driver through and through. He will try all of the moves. He'll try to fake you out. He wants to fill up the mirrors. Very old school in that respect, and he's not willing to set in line for anything. If that just means showing you his nose, he is going to do that. Grady here might be in the best spot, though. We saw that earlier with Kavaka and Soldatov whenever Berrier got in between them. Soldatov was able to come through, and maybe Grady could do the same thing. If Lawrence tries to get Barzaghi, maybe Grady can come through as well. All these drivers fighting over the 8th place position. Meanwhile, Soldatov has lost the position from Berrier, or excuse me, Soldatov and Berrier are still in front of Fischel, rather. And Kavaka is all by himself in 3rd place for the moment. 2 cars have pitted, Savalainen and Sundstrom. Mahalan has been down pit lane, but that was due to a drive-through penalty.
Talking about straight line speed, I sort of mentioned to our broadcaster, says, I wonder what the Ferraris are doing. Pre-patch, this car used to be immense on a low setup, a low drag setup with quality fuel, and we'll see what we can do. The overboost flicking, that's kind of the shift up point for a lot of Ferrari drivers. I know you literally just ping the neck of this engine right up until it screams at you for no more. And look at this, 280, no one in front. And I think we were just about to touch 281. That is potentially a full stint amount of fuel with nobody in front, and you're already touching 280 kilometers an hour. It's just some of the speed that these cars can do in a straight line are insane.
Well, I was wondering what Tidge would be doing with Martin Lawrence. Maybe become a Martin Lawrence fan and hope he catches Marzaghi. Quite the opposite. Martin Grady trying to get around Lawrence on the straightaway by himself. Says, I don't need your charity. I'll go up there and get it myself. But didn't quite happen on that particular occasion. And they all cycle out to the way that they were. We assume the Honda is the quickest car in a straight line. Ryan Mawson, what do we think the second quickest car in a straight line is here today?
It's a good toss-up between so far. I would say either the Ferrari or the Audi. The Audi, once again, was around about 280 kilometers an hour with no slipstream and no one to help him. And the Ferrari's 280, 281. You've got to kind of factor in the fuel of what each driver is running. You know, we don't at least yet know what strategy each driver is on. But it does seem that the mid-engines, the slippery-bodied, mid-engines that can get that great run off the corners, they do hold their own in a straight line. We saw the 171, this car, deep in the slipstream, all the way up the straights, didn't gain a thing.
That is a very good point indeed. Well, I have to say that people in chat, I see what you're saying. You guys are loving the visuals of the racetrack, and I can't say so does our broadcaster producer, Stewie. He's over here talking to us in our ears. You can't hear him, but we can, saying that just how much he's been loving some of the changes to the visuals, and he's been making his own adjustments, his own artistic direction as he is allowed to do, and it's just been brilliant stuff. And it changes visually for us in the booth. It changes it as well. We are very happy to hear that you are appreciating it. Carlos in chat saying that he loves, or Sundstrom is loving the early pit stop strategy. I think if you're in the middle of the pack, I don't see a problem with that myself. Coming in very early, and the only thing you lose is maybe a little bit of draft, but you're faster than somebody, doesn't really matter, right? In the corners, because you're going to be stuck behind them. We call Max Payne, and going to that GTR for a second. Are we surprised at how sort of not great the GTR has been so far?
It's one of those, I would like to say yes, but it's quite an old car now, and the people who pick it because you love it, and that's kind of sometimes all you need as a driver. They want to have fun, and they love that car. But if you think about the GTR's first iteration, which was actually, I think, almost a GT1 car,
It was a GT1 car.
It's how old now? Nearly 10 years. It's got to be over 10 years old.
I mean, what the GT1 GTR came out, what, 2012, 2011?
I think so.
Yeah.
It's an old iteration that they've just keep sort of bolting pieces on and go. So you're gonna struggle with the likes of some of the freshly built, M Sport prepped, custom built race cars. But it is such fun to see one keep going though. And going on about the early pit strategy, the other advantage that gives you, if you can look on the track map as well, which is over to our right side, the 899 there is all in their own little bubble. They can just lap at their pace, no one in front of them, no one getting away, and no battles that they necessarily want like this, as Tidge is going to take the scenic route all the way, I think, to the airport. We just wanted to quickly check out the terminal. It's going to be a Bentley Snap. I know that all too well. That was what I was talking about with the Bentleys. If you unload that car, the rear end will try and overtake the front, whether you like it or not.
So you know how I do the maths on this channel. You longtime viewers will be aware of that. Let's do the math together tonight, folks. Let's count. That is the second time that Martin Grady has done that. That's going to be 2 track limit violations surely for the driver of the 18. He gets one more of those, and then it's going to be a trip down pit lane, an unwanted trip down pit lane on the limiter. Hello to my Thursday commentator partner, Tim Peck, who's in chat. Will Matush has also joined us in chat as well, approving of the V10 Power and Sound Belch. What an excellent name that ended up being. He's loving he says that ACC is a visual and auditory treat. Right, you are. It really just is. The big thing for me in 1.8, I think that the thing that you see, but you don't necessarily appreciate until you go back to the old way that the sim used to look, is the night lighting is just so much more ambient, and it creates this realistic sort of feeling, almost claustrophobic at times, and it's brilliant.
Yeah, and it is how a lot of times, when you watch on boards from the real cars, night racing is not, you can't see everything. You, a lot of times, see nothing. As Soldatov in the 911 is going to easily blast past Barrier in a straight line. Bentley is not really a car great in the straight lines, but Barrier is just so much better through the corners. We've seen every single time. And actually, looking back, speaking of corners, that is Herbert Frechel out of nowhere has managed to keep with him for so long, has made the smallest mistake. He's not going to go try round the outside. It's a long old way, and I think he's going to just be squeezed out, but he's still there. It's another right-hand corner, another advantage to Barrier, and actually, Vantage Barrier looked like he backed out of that a little bit.
He's sideways there is Herbert Frechel. He waited so long to be able to get that position back, and he's gonna lock it up here. He's gonna go off the racing track, and that's gonna be position surrendered, but it's not gonna be position surrendered. Valentin Barrier's headed off. It's pit stop time for the 72 Bentley, so eventually, somehow, that Frechel's gonna get that position back anyway. And oh my goodness, an excellent battle there, as Frechel will hope to catch up to Soldatov in front, who has scampered away just a little bit. And what about Dario Barzaghi here? Close quarters racing, a little bit of a tap out of the way, but says, you're not having it, son.
Just managing to hold their own. Like I said, the Audi with the V10 power down the straight, as Wolf put it, and managing to hold it through the corners. It's going to be an incredibly tricky car to pass with Barzaghi driving it. And I think Barrier actually might have dipped out of this battle to try and do what the 899 is currently doing. We've seen that car, Barrier has the better handling through the corners. You can see it, even versus the likes of the Aston Martins. That car can have it through sectors 1 and 3. It just doesn't have quite the straight line speed. He's under fire at the end of the straights. He's under fire into the start of sector 3. I think that might actually be a little bit of a strategy call. Just get out of the battles you don't want, get into some clean air, and lap the times that you know your car can do quite consistently, and come out ahead, I think, again, of Frechel. It'll be interesting to see, now that Frechel doesn't have this battle for the position, can just the speed of the Honda, the higher average speed down the straight, will that bring it back for them?
That's a good question. Another question I have is Juna Savalainen in the 100. They pitted extremely early in this race. Are they going to be okay to the finish, or is that car going to be ailing a little bit in the waning moments of this race? And keep in mind, they pitted almost immediately when the pit stops opened up. So I'm curious what that 100 will look like at the end of this race. Meanwhile, Martin Lawrence still fighting off this man, Martin Grady, but also fighting with Barzaghi in front, as this battle has done nothing but heat up in recent laps, as pit stops have I expected some more cars to come down pit lane from the front, but they have not on this particular lap. Up front, Taylor still leads, still the quickest car on the racetrack. This has the fastest lap anyway. The gap isn't ballooning to Van der Velde in second place. It was 5.1 seconds about 8 laps ago. Actually, closer to 6.5, 7 laps, but who's counting? I'm not. But it's only went up by about 0.6 of a second in that time span. So the gap in the Delta, not very big at all between those two drivers. And Kabaka has nearly fallen off an additional 5 seconds in that time span, just for reference.
Yeah, so the 33, maybe not quite liking the full race setup going on, just sort of ailing time. I need to keep my eye on the gap as well. I don't know if the 911 of Soldatov is gaining or losing. The gap has been kind of hovering around this 2.9 to 3 second margin, looking off of the back wing of, once again, of Barzaghi, the number 8. You can see what can either of these guys do in the slipstream, but that was a big twitch from the Audi, and that's going to put Martin Lawrence up the inside, coming into this long right-hander. The Audi is on the outside of the line, but he just can't hold it there. There's no grip on the outside of the circuit.
Oh, and perhaps the best thing that they could have possibly done, Barzaghi tries to slip in there. He saw a very yellow Bentley there thought, no, 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 I'm not giving up 2-for-1 specials here. I'm not offering you any sort of real estate or track. And immediately they got off the throttle again and slotted into that position to stop the advances of Martin Grady, who was very much willing to take that real estate away, but gets in there. So now Martin Lawrence gets through 7th place for the 171 Connection Lost Racing car on a what I assume a brand new wheel and setup. That is, unless he has, for the purpose of this championship, reverted back to his old setup. But I'm not sure exactly what he's done. We didn't expect him here today, but here he is. He didn't sign out, and he ended up being here after all. He's having issues with his new setup for his peripherals, but either way, marching inside the top 10 and moving forward. Rapid GT, by the way. Remember earlier we were counting with Jesse? Well, it turns out the math was wrong in that particular occasion, as Martin Grady only has the one track limits warning. Now, I know I've seen that car go off a couple of times, but only one of those counted as a track limit warning.
They'll probably have been then that a few of them were no time gained. If you let out the throttle so much, you can, you'll be awarded if you don't gain any time. Won't give you another track limits warning. But here we go once again. Now the Audi. It's the Audi's turn to have the slipstream down the straight. What an absolute beast in a straight line. Tries to go up the inside. Martin Lawrence again hanging around the outside, and actually that's Mike Grady looking to the inside, has put the Bentley up there. It's going to be an exact deja vu moment for Barzaghi. Hung out the outside of the racetrack, but he says, no, not this time. I have found the grip. I am not giving up this position.
That outside move into that corner, or off of that corner, I should say, is actually quite brilliant. It saved my bacon on a handful of occasions as well, and Barzaghi's using that to great effect. He finned off Martin Lawrence for a few extra laps. He did the same thing to Grady there. I just realized something. Dario Barzaghi is in a Martin sandwich right now.
That he very much is so. I'm sure he would very much like to get out of this sandwich, back to being the top bread that he once was.
Didn't know my partner in the booth was a poet, but here you go. Well, we've only had the one steward's decision after the 4 initial ones that we brought to you. Race against it between the 49 and the 82. The 49 turns in too much. The 82 turns too little. It's what they say, 50-50 thing. Racing incident. Well, what isn't a 50-50 thing is brand new drive-through, Ryan Mawson.
Yes, Tinko ending up with the drive-through. And I'm just trying to find all my notes. I think that was, once again, is that a track limits warning?
It is indeed.
Go. Even in P2, this track can claim you. It did look like sometimes though, watching this car in practice, that McLaren, I know a few people that I've talked to kind of say it's kind of like driving a high downforce car, like a Formula or a Radical. You have to have so much corner speed, you have to trust the car so much. If it does go wrong, you will be going off the race circuit. So it does surprise me that Tinko probably trying to make his gap to Kavaka that little bit wider so that his penalty doesn't affect. Just push that one bridge too far.
Yes, indeed. And your leader of the race, Taylor, in pit lane. Tinko is as well, but theirs will be to serve the drive-through. I think Taylor saw the drive-through for the 166 and said, well, I wasn't going to pit here, but now is the best time. Normally, in the leader of the race, you would try to pit really late into the session, into the race. And I think that the drive-through from Tinko might have forced Taylor's hand. Actually, I take that back. That might not be the case at all now that I think about it. Might have just been trying to pit at the halfway point. Max Payne coming into the pit lane, though. Was this a little too quick? Oh, I don't know.
That looked incredibly hot coming into the pit lane. The line sneaks up on you. It's a sharp right into the pit lane, and the line is very much there. It's one of those now with the updated pit speed requirements. They now give you sort of no leeway have to see what happens to the 966 when they finally pull out of the pit. If they have sped, they will get a penalty immediately.
Yeah, it'll be very telling when they hit that pit exit line, won't it? We'll have to see. That looked really quick, but maybe that extra jostling they were doing saved them. It's only a matter of time, Max Payne. He'll know as soon as we do as well. Let's follow him out of pit lane. You'll see a line painted on the track across the exit lane here. When he gets there, if a little red notification shows up beside his name, he was speeding. If it isn't, and there it is. Drive-through penalty for speeding in the pit lane.
Well, there you go. We did expect it to be. And I think this is a replay of what happened to the 9. This is what happened to the 166 on the inside of Lawrence. Scary moment, but you can see what the McLaren can do when you give it the handling. It is, you're at a compromise on the inside, being squeezed that hard. Didn't even matter.
Pico saying, I have places to go and people to see. Not wasting any time making friends with anybody on the long road back up to the top. Now, if that drive-through, of course, he still has to pit. In fact, is in pit lane. As a matter of fact, has been given another 5-second penalty. So let's see what happened here. It hasn't shown up, but we do have a racing incident between the 8 and the 171. Hard racing through turn 11 between the two drivers with minor contact. But 5-second penalty, that's additional.
Well, I think what's happened there is because the drive-through for track limits is a separate penalty was being issued by the game.
Oh,
I think
you're
that
correct.
the steward's decision still stood. So even though he'd served that drive-through, steward's 5-second decision, that still existed.
Spot on, Ryan Mawson. I had forgotten he already had a 5-second penalty there, but that leads very nicely into the point that I was going to make, is that now that he's completed his pit stop as Tico van der Velde, he had an additional 5 seconds. He would have been still in second place, but now I don't think he will be. Drive through pit delta, whatever that is, some 20, 30 seconds will put him where exactly? Right around 5th, perhaps.
Possibly. And speaking of pit deltas and what might shake things up a bit, Taylor, who was leading the race, has come out of the pits behind barrier. You can just about see the red LEDs there, the endurance lights of the Bentley, and that is because Taylor has taken tyres in his pit stop, as well as Payne in the Nissan. So a couple of drivers actually opting to take tyres tonight.
Nicholas Taylor's car doesn't look clean, does it? I don't know if they've had contact, Taylor, with anybody else. Will certainly Barrier in front of them now, the leader of the cars that have pitted. Or, matter of fact, that might have to wait for that to update, but it certainly looks like that is the case right now. Minno Crozen trying to go around the long way, gets deposed there by Marzaghi as this battle does continue. And well, Marzaghi was fighting a Bentley earlier, but that was a very different colored Bentley.
Yeah, and the Bentley looks like it's actually a bit of a struggle to pass Marzaghi in that the Audi, which I didn't even actually know myself, but I kind of thought that the Audi was a little bit slower in a straight line, and that it was, the Ferrari was the car that you wanted if you wanted a mid-engine with speed here. But no, the Audi holds its own in a straight line, just about managing to keep it in those track limits. You can hear the revs pick up as bouncing over the curbs. But as the Bentley, you're already a little bit slow onto the straights. It's not going to blow anyone's mind. And the Audi does have it in the corners if you can keep it under control. And we're looking on board, slight slipstream maybe, but there goes 280. And the Bentley, even with the slipstream, 275. So that's just free time for Marzaghi.
Okay, so now I can confirm that Taylor is behind Barrier. Barrier is the leader of the cars that have pitted. The 72 Bentley is the leader of the cars that have pitted, but Taylor is catching Barrier. That will be a battle for 9th place, but could very well be a battle for the lead of the race. And I'd like to take another look at Taylor's car. because something about the front of that number 17 Aston doesn't look right to me, or at least it didn't in the light. But now it looks completely fine here. It must have just been the lighting reflecting off of it. It looked a bit dinged up and damaged, but as you can clearly see there, it isn't at all in this light. It just must have been the way the light was hitting the car. It looked slightly wrinkled up as if it had been agitated by a little bit of fender contact. No, not the case at all in the 17. You look right in front of Taylor here, you'll see Valentin Berrier, the man he's chasing for what could potentially be the lead of the race.
Yeah, it's one of those, probably the Aston Martin with some of the sharp angles on it in these low lights. It sort of tricks the eye, and all the rubber splattered on the cars as well. They look quite a prominent track for marbles is Paul Ricard. They sort of all sit at the outside of the tracks. You can see it, the headlights when they sweep over, all the bits of tyres that go out. And for Dan Mulholland, a bad day gone worse for the 777. This is second drive through track limits.
It's enough to make you pull your hair out, isn't it? You've already got one, and now you've got two in the span of, well, less than an hour, in fact. And talked about that in pre-race. There's a very good reason why we decided to talk about track limits pre-race, is because we know here there are some corners that are fairly stingy, and some of the track limit changes have done nothing but aid the stinginess some of the time. And of course, in the wet, can you imagine what the track limits must be around here in the wet now? I don't want to think about that. That'll haunt me in my dreams. But this race haunting Mulholland in his real life awakeness here for the second time. Will have to come down pit lane at speed to serve a drive-through penalty for track limits infringement. That's just hard to take.
Yeah, it's one of those days sometimes where if it's not going bad, it's going worse. And speaking of, here is, looking back, Harley Chamberlain, and that is the 899. That's Mikael Sundstrom making his way through the traffic, but Sundstrom has gone deep into the corner. We've seen this happen before. Actually, the Honda is also shuffled out. Mikael is squeezed off the racetrack. That is a move that is quite common on what happens. You know, you go for the switchback maneuver. If the car underneath you loses grip and starts sort of sliding up the racetrack, you really have nowhere to go at that point. You just have to avoid a collision and hope, you know, you can continue your race.
I wonder what the stewards will say about that. I think they might rule that that was avoidable contact, Ryan Mawson, but not a steward. I'm in the commentary box with you, so I'm going to leave that to the professionals. Meanwhile, Taylor has all but caught Valentin Berrier for the lead of the race, that's of the cars that have pitted anyway, as João Cavaca leads the race overall, and Minno Krozen once again trying this pass on Barzaghi. He's going to have to do it around the outside, thinks better of it, falls back into line, doesn't even get to the corner there before he accepts defeat into this corner. Is that just Minno driving very sensibly there, knowing that, well, I've played this song a few times, I know how it ends for him.
Just going over the curves, Minno Krozen just about keeps it within the lines of the racetrack. I think what was happening there, Barzaghi was going incredibly defensive. I think there was a slight overlap, but just the Audi pulled out, and at the last moment, Minno decided that, well, if I can't pass you, I at least want a tiny bit of slipstream for my troubles, and follow him through the corner. But, I mean, look at the cornering speed of the Bentley. You can carry more corner speed than the Audi, but you can't do anything in a straight line. And even coming out of some of the slower speed corners, and here the Bentley wants to spin its tyres up. It is quite vicious on the power delivery in some of the lower gears. And there you go, the Audi's gone with the mid-engines, more weight over the rear. What really can you do out of the last corner?
We went deep right there, did Barzaghi, and this could be all that Minno Krozen needs down the inside. He's going to have a right-hander to his benefit, will Minno, but will he get out-dragged before he get there? No, he won't. It's going to be who's better on the brakes. It's going to be Minno Krozen here as he's going to get it done, and how. No option for a retort from Dario Barzaghi as he's going to get the position and the pass done. But just as I say that, looking up the inside is Dario in the 8. Could he potentially get back side by side, covered off by Minno Krozen as they hit the straightaway Now, what will this be? The reverse position of a lap ago, and you can see that Audi suck.
And there you go, the Audi blasting by once again. This is why Paul Ricard does bring some great racing, but as a driver, it's just infuriating. Minnow got the position, he got the position done. He had the move. It was all good. But now it's the turn of the Audi. It is strongest in this sector. It didn't even need to defend.
Here we
And
go
once again,
again.
here comes the Bentley. Underneath, there is an overlap. The Audi cannot turn down once again. And the Audi has actually gone off the road. Barzaghi has left the racetrack.
Let's look at this again. Well, up the inside is Minnow Crozet here. He's trying to keep it off of the 8th. They're trying to race respectfully, and he nearly locks it up, this Minnow. He slides a little bit, but the car on the outside, Barzaghi going incredibly wide there. I don't know if maybe Minnow spooked him, or he just ran out of racetrack trying to keep the speed up through the corner. We've seen him use that to his advantage several times, Barzaghi. It didn't work out on that occasion, and Minnow gets through. And could that have been the last gasp of Barzaghi? And finally, Minnow's through, and the 8 in pit lane here says they've had enough.
Keep an eye on the pit delta as well. I'm wondering if there might have been more pace in that Audi, but are they suffering tyre problems? There's only been, I think so far, 2 drivers that have taken tyres. I think it might be, once again, another splash and a dash for the 8. Obviously, only 25 minutes left. You ain't going to need much fuel for that in the Audi. And looking back up the road, this is Dan Darren Mulholland again. Rejoined the racetrack. They're still running around despite their 2 drive-throughs, and you've got to respect that. Your day has gone from bad to worse, but you have, in theory, finished ahead of all the people who retired.
Speaking of the people that have retired, we have lost an unholy amount of race cars in this race. It's the highest attrition rate that we have seen in quite some time, and it's hard to see why that might be, other than just dissatisfaction with the racing. And sometimes drivers get it into their heads they don't like a particular track. They feel it's not worth their time and their effort, and sometimes they pull it in just a little bit early. Of course, you'd always like to see them race it out because you never know what could happen, but sometimes the driver's thinking it's just not worth it to me. As Tinko, by the way, a little update on Van der Velde, your championship leader, up into 13th place, but considering he should be right around 10th place, shows you that the damage has been done. The recovery drive very much on for the driver of the 166.
And that's exactly what we said right at the start, sitting on the grid. You never know what's going to happen. What does this car have in the race, the strengths, the weaknesses, and how does the driver cope? And obviously, Tinko, it's been a less than stellar day. I'm sure in his head and his strategy, it would have been a much greater plan, but you've got to play with the cards that you were dealt with. Paul Ricard is a cruel dealer. A lot of times, a lot of drivers, mentioned earlier, 7 have already quit. It's not a track favored by any drivers, but when the racing is good, the racing is good.
It is really a shame. We've seen some excellent racing here today, and I don't think that we're done with that racing. By the way, Taylor has gotten around Barrier for the lead of the cars that have pitted up into the 8th place position. Barrier 3 seconds back already. Just shows you the pace of that 17. There's a reason they have the magenta number beside their name. They're absolutely rolling. I feel like Van der Velde was the only car even in their wheelhouse, which is a shame considering, but it does mean that there is some hope for Tinko here to get some of these places back. He's 6.2 seconds behind Mikael Sundstrom, and Sundstrom is working on Harley Chamberlain. That's for what is now 11th place. It's likely to be somewhere inside the top 10 after everyone completes their stop. João Cavaca sold the top for Shell Dubel, Lawrence Grady, and Minnow Crozen, the cars that have not pitted. Crazy to think, go back to qualifying, João Cavaca just with an excellent qualifying lap, win the Ferrari. I don't think we would have called that, but one of the better cars in a straight line, as our broadcaster Sui showed you up front for the time being. Cavaca sold the top for Shell. Do they stay out as long as possible here, do you think?
I think they would be looking at the track map as well. There is minimal traffic in front. So as a driver, you're looking at your relative. You're looking at, when is the optimum time to pit. You've got the fuel to do it, and there's nobody in front of you. There's no point getting stuck in some of the back marker traffic, as it. But actually, fourth place out of that, Adam Dubell has decided in the 840 that they have finally had enough of that, and they're going to pull out where they cycle back through. But for top three, especially when they're just within slipstream range, I think 0.9 Herbert Frischel was in the last timing split. I think they're going to try just about stay together for as long as they dare, or as long as the fuel tank will allow.
Well, I've just been told the 725 of Harley Chamberlain was giving a warning for avoidable contact. No real penalty there, just a warning for the contact is all. Chamberlain will continue on his race as Herbert Frischel does the same, and the other Honda in the field, the Angry Bird 86 Honda, has been going incredibly well. Had some nice battles at the beginning of the race, and it's sort of settled into a groove. Spent a large time chasing Soldatov. Soldatov, who was behind him about 15-20 minutes into this race, ended up leapfrogging the 86. The 86 has caught him again, finally. Had to pass a few more drivers to get there, because Soldatov has turned it on here in his 911 Aston.
Yeah, exactly, managing to keep that gap nice and consistent, really. Rebecca does sort of have these moments of pace as well. He's pulled out that gap once again to 1.6. It was almost 0.9 at the start of the lap. I'm just thinking that maybe the 33 just isn't fully happy with the race setup, or there's something different from that car between qualifying and race, because they had monumental speed in qualifying all the way up to pole position. It just in the race, it doesn't seem that the 33 is as happy as it was. And here we go once again as the sparks fly. Herbert Frischel slowly reeling in Soldatov. That 911 just getting a little bit bigger each time. And that's all you need to do. Gap is now 0.7, was 0.9 the last lap round. Just need to keep nibbling away at your opponent, just ever so slowly, little by little, and then if you've still got something left in the tank and left in the tyres at the end, that is when you mount the attack.
Yeah, it's hard to see how Soldatov is going to keep Frischel behind him. We know that the Honda is an absolute beast down the straightaway, and that's really all you need. Beat him down the straightaway and take position into the corner. Easier said than done, mind you. Konstantin Soldatov will know that the car is getting bigger in his mirror. Probably going to fight him as hard as he can. This could be for a podium position after all. Of course, some of these teams have taken tires, some of them haven't taken tires, and that has mixed up the field this entire season. We remember the Boothby Jardier battle that came to blows a few times, and then Nico van der Velde using a very similar strategy to outfox and outwit the both of them. You have no reason to believe it won't be any different here today. The unfortunate part for you watching at home is we don't know either how it's going to shake out, because we're not mind readers. We don't know what Kavaka, Soldatov, and Frischel are going to do. We're passengers just like the rest of you.
I mean, that's always sort of our job, is commentate on what we can see in front of us. What we can see in front of us, though, is that the 911, you've got a few corners of just having some wobbles here and there. I think, after an hour and 15 on these tyres, you will start to feel it, but the 86 of the Honda, they were feeling it already at the start of the race. I think that is sort of one crumb of comfort, though, in Soldatov's head. He knows that even if the Honda does get past, he has the better handling, he has the better corner speed. So long as he can keep it close into Sector 3 or ahead into Sector 1, it's going to be hard for the Honda to come back.
How many times this season have we seen races dictated by pit strategy, and there's no real consensus on which one's the right one? Tires versus no tires, filling up the car at the beginning of the race, taking less fuel, using less fuel to get out in front, and then filling it up more than you normally would have to if you had a full fuel. There's no real consensus. I think it's track based, And because so many different strategies have won this season, it's an absolute toss up and going to make these last 17 minutes very interesting indeed. Forgot to mention at the top of the show, by the way, that we'd like to thank all of our partners, Race Department, AK Informatica, Driver 61, Fanatec, and Sim Racing GP. We'll hear more about those fantastic folks after the race tonight. And speaking of after the race tonight, just one more round left in this championship. It's hard to imagine anyone taking it away from Tinko, but all of the fights throughout the field, we had 3 ties at different positions in the before this race today. Ryan, it's going to come down to the wire for podium places here, I feel.
And as well, one of those you can't fully disclose it. We thought that Tinko might have been the unstoppable force, but obviously Paul Ricard has not been his track. So it's not a case of that this driver is unbeatable. It's going to make the championship very interesting. If Tinko can keep it the consistent that we saw that car earlier on in the championship, then yeah, it's going to be very difficult. But if Jardier reappears with that monumental Porsche, and maybe it's not Tinko's day fully, it's going to make it incredibly interesting. And for everyone else who's still scrabbling for positions, you know, Herbert Frischel versus the Aston, this could be like the 1 or 2 points that, you know, drivers need.
It could be. I mean, of course, Tinko not winning the race. We don't expect Tinko to win the race today. I didn't expect Tinko to have to win the race today, and I don't think he has that pressure on himself either. That he just needs to finish somewhere in the points today, and he could be a clinched championship winner here at the end of the day, regardless, as long as he gets some amount of points. And of course, that's Harley Chamberlain in front of him. And that will be the next driver he will attempt to make a pass on that for 11th at the moment. As Tinko probably still could finish inside the top 5, I think is reasonable expectation from the 166 NACA driver. But for so many other people, because Tinko's finishing down there, they're going to get potentially more points, and that's going to change their championship, and it could be the shot in the arm they need going into the final round as well. You add that the fact that neither Boothby or Chartier are here this week for 2 completely different reasons, mind you, that it's going to set off a chain reaction for the final podium positions. It's going to rearrange the entire top 10, potentially the top 20. Of course, you have Savalainen in the race, who only has, I think, 8 or 9 points this season. Has not participated in a lot of races. Oh, and Tinko with a big old move, and that almost didn't come off. That almost ended wrong, but it didn't there. And it looks like Harley Chamberlain is just going to let the 166 by. And if I had a fright like that, I'd probably do the same.
Yeah, I think there was leaving it to the last minute of Slipstream. That was very much
Brown.
last minute. Very much lastminute.com. I mean, I think there was just about room for a few more coats of paint there. That was just the replay of the 166 going by. Terrifying moment, though, I'm sure, because the Honda has a rear view camera as the rear view. I'm sure that Harley Chamberlain might just need to let the heart rate settle there for a moment.
They made a little bit of contact. I think the replay showed us right there as well. And Fred Brown moment indeed. We'll take another. Yes, indeed. Let's take a look and yeah, exactly. Saw that right there. Just a little bit of contact there. But we thought they got too close for comfort. Turns out they did. Code Brown moment confirmed. I want to read a humorous comment from the chat. Carlos in chat says, I was going to say the Ferrari sucks, but then Kavaka happened. Yeah, I think that's happened to a lot of people. It certainly wasn't our top pick of the day, but ends up being one of the better cars today.
Yeah, and the Ferrari is, you know, for a while, if you remember pre-patch, it was quite dominating in some of the higher splits and certain tracks. You always had to pick a Ferrari, but now it's quite the mix of what car is subjectively best all-rounder. I still do think, though, that the Ferrari it's tough to fight against as a general all-round car. Good on fuel. If you can get the handling, you know, it's very good on a lot of circuits. It's got a few tricks up its sleeve, like the speed. And it's just kind of what a lot of people say, or a lot of drivers, Ferrari drivers I know say, it's just nice to drive. I couldn't get on with the front end personally, but I'm not driving in this split, Jesse.
Well, you very well could be if you really wanted to. It'd be a lonely old comms box for me, but I reckon you could go out there and mix it up amongst them. Kavaka still leads the race, but it's only a 1.5 seconds to Soldatov. That gap coming down. You never know, folks. We know that Taylor is the quickest car. We know that Taylor ran away with it in the early goings of this race, but it doesn't mean anything. If Kavaka, Soldatov, or Frischel could all have quicker pit stops, which I think they might do, and try and win this race, it doesn't matter how good Taylor's been. Kavaka, Soldatov, Frischel are the ones in the driver's seat. They're all covered by just about 2 seconds, first to third as well. And I don't think we're quite done here, so don't go away. This 11 minutes could be very spicy indeed.
It looks like the 899 is trying to put the pressure now on the 725 Harley Chamberlain. This is Mikael Sundstrom. This battle, I'm sure, must be infuriating for Mikael. Even the Mercedes, which is not a car you were going to pick if you wanted to win a handling race, has it more through the corners. It's just the Honda in the straights, as usual. You can't really, sort of fight it. Mikael's been stuck behind for a while. Even the few moments where it looks like the 899 could have made a pass, just hasn't come off. You can see they're only just gaining in the slipstream, and that is a car with the biggest litre engine in the grid. It's a 6.2 litre V8, very much an old generation engine, even though that is the 2020. He's basically put a new front end on the car, give it some new electrics, and says, there you go, evolution.
I wonder if Chamberlain having to fuel save.
I'll have to re-listen to the revs again. The V6 is difficult. Yeah, possibly though. It did look like just at the end of the straight, the 899 suddenly gained a lot.
Yeah, it looks, there's something off about that Honda, and I don't think it's been involved in a collision, but of course we saw Chamberlain lay over for Vandervelde for whatever reason, and they're basically doing the same thing here for Mikael Sundstrom. So I wonder if that 899 has had a fueling issue and is now fuel saving, or maybe just missed a little bit of the strategy, because, yeah, that doesn't look like an intersect down a straight, does it?
No, 899 position gain for Mikael Sundstrom. I'm wondering if the 725 might actually want some of that slipstream, just to, a couple of points of fuel saved. But yeah, Mikael Sundstrom actually pulling out into sector 1. We'll see what happens down the straight. If the Honda starts catching again in the slipstream, then we know that Harley Chamberlain has got the foot welded completely to the floor, going for it. Or tricky one to tell, at least from the broadcast camera. So here we go, left-hander onto the straight, just about clip that curb. You can watch the shift lights. Oh, they're ringing it out to the end.
Very interesting indeed. The car just doesn't look like it has the little extra that the other Honda does. Or for shells, well, there it is right there. Never mind. There is exactly what I was waiting to see. And there you have it. At the end of the straight, Harley Chamberlain did have the legs that time through. It just had a weird lap, I think, there.
Probably a weird exit. We have seen both these cars that the Hondas are a bit of a handful in handling wise. I'm just wondering if they just had a bit of a bad lap or bad entry onto the corner.
You could see him adjusting things, Chamberlain, in the car. The hand movements in the car are deliberate. If you adjust one of the dials on the car, it adjusts with your hands the same way that shifting works. If you shift the car, your hand goes to shift. Same thing with adjusting various knobs. And I wonder if he is having to play around with the settings, or maybe just something's off with the car a little bit. Either way, trying to get to the checkered flag here today with just about 8 minutes to go and 5 drivers still yet to pit. Soldatov, Frischel, Lawrence Grady, and Minnow Crozen. Started with 22 cars down to 16. The attrition has been just about as high as it's been in recent memory. Kavaka trying to go about their way. They were the leader of the race. They came into pit and now cycle out second among the cars that have pitted. The ball is now in Soldatov's court. What will they do here?
And I think Soldatov, they're gonna have to come in within at least the next 2 laps. We're looking at the pit timer. Obviously, we've got 7 minutes left in the race, but the window closes in 5. With an almost 2 minute lap time, you're not going to squeak 3 laps. They're gonna try push it to the absolute limit of it. We're only gonna have maybe a minute or less. But actually, there you go. Some of the cars coming down the pit lane. The 171 is in for the Connection Loss Racing Team, Martin Lawrence. They will do their splash and dash to the end, and Minnow Crozen actually follows them in as well in the 82 Bentley.
Just about last call for pit stops here. Lawrence is in. Minnow is in. The top 3 still yet to pit. Soldatov for Shell and Grady. And Taylor is a coming. Where will they cycle out? We reckon Taylor, at this point, might have enough to cycle back out to the lead regardless of what Soldatov and Frechelle do, but we'll see just how it all shakes out. Could be Taylor, Kavaka, Lawrence, your top 3, as Barrier in the 72 Bentley has been shuffled out to just about 3rd, and Minnow Crozen has sped in the pit lane.
There you go, the SG30 with some of the new, that new ruling that we mentioned about is a very, very vicious sort of entry at Paul Ricard. Not only is it basically a 90-degree right, what you can't see coming around that 90-degree blind right is the line is right there, and that is one of the things you must do at Paul Ricard, let alone what your race strategy is and, what your tire management, fuel load, all of that. It's you have to get into the pit lane, and you have to practice that. And Herbert Frechelle nearly has a heart attack there. You can see here's the dead right. Aston Martin checks up, and just about.
That was very, very close for Herbert Frechelle, and I wonder if he got to the limit in time. That's what you call attacking the pit in. He certainly did that. Konstantin Soldatov did not change tires on that 911 as they very quickly got off the jack and is down. And I don't think either for Herbert Frechelle. Where will the leaders come through? Taylor's already through, and Frechelle's going to be about 5th or 6th place. Here's Kavaka. Kavaka's going to get through as well. And or maybe not there. Close racing action. Kavaka's going to get crossed over, and Frechelle will go back in front. That's for 4th place. Martin Grady, the man they call Tidge, the man I call King of the Plebs, leading the race. He'll have to come in, you'd expect, this time by, as Nicholas Taylor will assume the lead of the race here by 4.5, 5 seconds over Konstantin Soldatov. And looking like Frechelle is going to only just keep that position after a spirited turn 1 and 2.
Yeah, I think Kavaka he saw the cars coming out of the pits. He dove in hard to try and keep the position. Can be done, even if you go deep into first half of turn 1, the exit, you have the inside. The Honda just managed to get the grip and keep it around the outside. But I mean, look at now that all the fuel is burnt away. That Ferrari is pulling on the Honda in the straight line with the slipstream, and that's what I mentioned.
That just doesn't even look human, what I'm looking at there. That's Zhao Kavaka stalking Herbert Frechelle. This could be, and likely is, for the final podium position tonight. Zhao, the splitter cam of his Ferrari, looking up at Frechelle's Honda. This is the fight, but just look at that Honda leave them in a straight line, but even still in the corners, all that time made back up by the Ferrari somehow. This is a straight up fight for the 3rd step of the podium. Martin Grady in the pit lane.
Well, there you go. As you mentioned, it would have had to be in this time around, and like I thought, 1 minute left on the clock. That was the last call for anyone to pit. So Martin Grady obviously will shuffle back out down the field. But all these cars now are going to be running at their absolute maximum speeds down the straight line. But actually, the Ferrari in a couple of these slower corners where the aero isn't working as hard, losing a little bit of time to the Honda, which is in the complete flip side, what we mentioned at the start of the race, where the Hondas seem to be all over. But it gets to the straight, and I think with the slipstream, we're going to see this Ferrari really, really pull on the Honda if he is within range. It's quite a long way up the road there. I think it might have just about squeaked out. They will have probably one more go around looking at where the leader is.
Well, keep in mind, Herbert's trying to catch Konstantin Soldatov as well. This is not over for second place. If Rochelle has a lot more pace than AMG, which we expect the Honda to be able to accomplish, this could be a fight for second place. And if Rochelle catches Soldatov here, if we're coming to one to go, this is going to be the last lap this time by. If Rochelle catches Soldatov, that's going to pull them all back to João Cavaca, and this could be a massive fight for second place. No such fight out front for the 17 AMR V8.
The 17, they have upped and gone 5 seconds. The gap has stabilized at 5.2 actually. The Nicholas Taylor in the 17 has taken it, driven it, victory in quite a commanding lead, really. You know, from the lights and gone. It's now sort of the last few points on offer, the last few points scrabbling around, and for Cavaca and for Shell, it's going to be one more time around. There's only limited places you can actually realistically mount an attack on this track, but for the 17, it's going to be a nice final victory lap. Look at all the rubber that's splattered on this car. It's definitely going to need a wash down by the engineers after that.
Our chat was actually talking earlier about how did that car get so dirty so quickly. I think part of that, folks, is the white paint. I think some of that is the track itself, the preset, but a very dirty car, but a very clean race from Nicholas Taylor. The Pleb Nico Racing AMR V8 Vantage has been on a tear today. This entire season, he has played second fiddle to the three big drivers, Van der Velde, Boothby, and Jardier. Today, it is all about him, a day where he could show what he has. Folks, Taylor is fourth in this championship. He has no stats, no pole positions, no podiums, no fastest laps, no nothing. Today, he's going to put a win in most of those columns. It has been just a dominating day from the driver, and it was not always like that. He got out qualified. It didn't look like he could be the man, but he is going to be the man. From obscurity in fourth place to a win, what will this do for his hopes? Could he potentially best nearly everyone and finish second in this championship? We will have to see. But today, the day belongs to Nicholas Taylor. It has been a complete race from this man.
Yeah, right from the turn one where we thought that the 17 might get jumped. Obviously, the Aston Martin is not the car you want off the line. No such thing. Held it around the outside of turn one and managed to basically drive away from everyone and make it look easy. Obviously, a driver very comfortable in the car, and they take the checkered flag for Nicholas Taylor, P1 at Port Ricard.
What a brilliant drive from them. Konstantin Soldatov will come across the line. An excellently ran race by the 911. Came from outside the top five to finish second. Herbert Rochelle, steady as she goes in the 86, gets rewarded with a third place position. João Cavaca will be wondering what they could have done a little bit differently in the 33 Ferrari, but still comes home fourth. Valentin Berrier probably thought they were fighting for a podium, but will have to settle for fifth place. Dubel, Savalainen, Grady, Tinko, Van der Velde, your championship leader, will finish ninth. By far the worst finish from the 166 McLaren this season. Mikael Sundstrom, considering all that they've been through, they spent the majority of the first half of this race running dead last, 20th, and will finish in the top 10. Harley Chamberlain, Barzaghi, Minnow Crows and Climbs, and Mulholland will be the final finishers today. And if I had to give a Spirit of the Race award, it would have to go to Darren Mulholland. Two big penalties today in the 777 Bentley took them out of any chance of a proper finish, but outlasted those that refused to finish this race. Driver of the day for me has to be Mulholland.
Yeah, continue going around even, after every single odds, taking the checkered flag and, you finish ahead of all the people that retired. And we mentioned about, some of these 1 or 2 points separates a lot of the a lot of the people in the mid pack. Well, for Mulholland, this could be exactly what he needs. He's finished ahead of a lot of the people who retired, still in the points zone. Even though that's 15th, that's dead last, you will still gain some points. When you're that close through the grid, every single point matters.
The fight is going to be on for second place in the championship. If my math serves me, Tico Vandervelde has done enough to win this championship here today and will be racing for nothing more than glory in 1 week's time. Those points are not official. It will be on for second place, however. And because we don't like to leave you on any cliffhanger, there were two stewards' decisions at the very end of this race. Racing incident between the 725 and the 166. All good there, and a warning for car 86 for weaving down the straight to break slipstream. None of those uh, stewards' decisions impact the race at all, and a very quiet race on the stewarding front, and a well deserved rest for them as well. Some excellent action on the track, Ryan.
Yeah, some excellent action. The race of two sort of styles. I would say it's the handling cars versus the speeds. Lots of swapping around and changing. Track limits going as wide as you dare, and some great strategy calls as well by some of the drivers. There's been Paul Ricard always does bring these great races out, even if the drivers don't necessarily enjoy it. I'm pretty sure that the fans love it.
I love it as well. And well, Mawson, we'll be saying goodbye to you, and I hope that you have a very nice weekend as well. As tomorrow for Night Owl Racing, as it continues, it'll be myself and Stewie bringing you all the action from Night Owl, and very safe travels, Ryan.
Yes, I've been stolen away. I must go, but I'm sure I'll have the stream on in the background. You know me, I never like to miss anything for GT racing.
Well, there you have it. We'll be back with you for that, and you can catch the complete schedule of racing on our Discord. Feel free to join the Discord and get involved in GT racing. The GT4 Winter Mini Championship signups are available now. If you're interested in GT4, it's a 3 round series in 3 different cars, single make races. We would love to see you in that as well. And of course, a big thank you to our partners that make this race and every race possible. RaceDepartment.com, your source for sim racing news and modifications. AK Informatica for providing our servers. Driver61, you can use our discount code at driver61.com. Get 25% off your driver coaching at driver61.com. Fanatec.com, the authority on sim racing equipment. Of course, their new launch of the GTDD on sale now, fanatec.com. Simracing.gp, if you're tired of the pub racing scene, join simracing.gp, join a community, get involved, and have some really great racing with some excellent tools for championship standings, etc., and so forth. It was a very exciting race here at Paul Ricard for the penultimate round of the Friday GT3 Championship. It saw us crown a champion, but it also changed the complexion for the other two podium spots. What will happen in the final week, we'll have to tell you when we get there. I've been Jesse Lee, joined by Ryan Mawson and Stewie in the box. We'll see you next time.
And I will see you next Friday.